It's been 3 weeks since KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi made those explosive allegations against top leaders within South African police services. Mkhwanazi has accused Police Minister Senzo Mchunu of having ties to criminal syndicates, of meddling in investigations into politically motivated murders. This week, Patriotic Alliance Deputy and Joburg Transport MMC, Kenny Kunene, was found at the house of murder-accused Katiso Molefe. What do we make of these developments? And is there really a link between crime and politics in South Africa? And what does that look like globally? Researcher for critical thinking and ethics at UCT's School of Management Studies, Jacques Rousseau, joins us now for a chat on this. Jacques, appreciate the time. It's a good morning to you. I hope you're well. I guess I can just start there. Is there really a relationship between politics and criminality ultimately? Because it feels like you can't sometimes separate the two when you really should be, because those politicians are the ones that create the laws that should be blocking criminality.
Morning, Arabile. Yes, well, of course we should ideally keep these things separated, but I don't think that there would be a reasonable thing to imagine that we have achieved here or in any other country. I think the key issue really is whether it can be kept at a level whereby it doesn't cripple state institutions, whereby it doesn't cripple public faith in governance and accountability and so forth. Because that's the real issue here, is that if people see that there's an incentive to pursue criminality, and if they consistently might get away with it and succeed or flourish despite engaging in criminality, then of course we have a real cultural problem from the ground up, and we'll keep on, in a sense, generating future generations of politicians who are willing to be corrupt. I think that's the key issue we should reflect on, rather than the circus theatric cases that we occasionally see cropping up. They're not exceptional in any way. They're just ones that we happen to have been brought to our attention.
Yeah, they often say, I mean, what is the saying then? I think it's justice having taken a while doesn't mean that justice is ultimately denied, right? But if one takes too long to enforce the law and to enforce justice, does that weaken institutions, particularly those of policing? Because then politicians can ultimately feel like they can get away with things as well.
Well, precisely. You might well, in a country like ours, where we are struggling so much with elements like this, you might well think you could just wait it out, in a sense, and you'll get away with it. Because, well, consider the Zuma case, for example. I mean, how many decades is that now of, in a sense, avoiding consequence? So one can see that as an escape route for yourself. So as long as you pause, and here, crucially, if you can get friends or colleagues or people who owe you favors into the exact commissions and inquiry groups that are meant to prosecute you, then that enhances your chances of getting away with whatever it is you're getting away with. And as Zondo said just yesterday, the shame and the regrets, or the regret rather, that he feels in swearing in people that he knows were implicated in state capture because he wrote the report under Ramaphosa, that is exactly the same sort of troubling thing, where you don't see, as you say, it's slow, but you don't see enough progress to trust that it really is actually even happening.
So if you were to have a person like former Chief Justice Raymond Zondo then refusing to actually, swear in certain people because of what he feels is the ethical morality that may be lost on certain members of parliament, would that change anything? Or would that send some sort of chilling message then perhaps to the leadership of the country that we're losing our morality and that institutions like the judiciary are actually trying to do their best here?
That's a good suggestion. We would need perhaps more than one such figure, right? It would need to be some sort of consolidated effort by a group of citizens with integrity in high positions to, at the same time, draw the nation's attention to this by perhaps releasing a statement en masse or resigning en masse or something like that. Because for as much as one person might respect Zondo and his integrity, other people, perhaps because of this culture, might think that he is part of the problem himself and that he has been telling lies, etc. So it will work for some cohort and not for others. So we need to, in a sense, have a coalition of people with integrity who represent all spectrums of belief and so forth to consistently say something, because single instances won't really help very much, I don't think.
How does this fare in the global context? And I say this not just of emerging nations and emerging markets, because those seem to certainly have a similar issue. It seems to flow similarly. But even in first world nations, how does this come together? Are you seeing this sort of relationship as well, similarly to what we're seeing in our country?
Well, it's always really been there, Arabile. I mean, consider in Italy, Berlusconi, or in France, Chirac and Sarkozy, or in America, Donald Trump, right? But citizens in countries like that, with at least a perceived stable bedrock of law and democracy and so forth, can trust that we'll get over this in a sense, because there's still enough routine convictions and there's no sense of a mass corruption. If it goes on for too long and you can't trust that anything can be trusted anymore, then I think we have this complete breakdown in people's willingness to adhere to law and proper procedure and so forth, because they can see endemic through the system a kind of failure of governance and a success of corruption. So you can tolerate a president who commits tax fraud if it's an isolated incident, and you can write that off as a aberration. But if it happens all the time, then there's no way to excuse it in a sense. I'm not saying excuse it morally. Yeah. There's no way to get over it as a society.
Yeah, it seems though as well, and if I keep to a global context, for example, a warrant of arrest by the ICJ used to mean quite a significant amount some time ago, whether it be for Saddam Hussein or Libya's former leaders as well, then all of that used to matter quite significantly. But now it feels like it's fallen by the wayside and it doesn't matter as much. I mean, you just look at the request or the warrant of arrest for whether it be Vladimir Putin or whether it be Turkey's president at some point as well, having cases against him. And of course, now as well, Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. Do those issues of a global judiciary somewhat being weakened by just perspective also impact how it trickles down to different countries, including ourselves, South Africa?
Precisely, they do. So the issue here is that in law in general and morality are social compacts. We have force, we see force in them because people, by and large, agree with them. And you signal that by following through when there's some violation of international law or some such. But it's not as if people are going to necessarily come into your country and arrest somebody who's leaving. But if you don't demonstrate to your citizens that you take this seriously, then when that trickles down into local instances of crime or corruption and so forth, why would we take them seriously then? So it gains its force through actually being prosecuted, actually being implemented rather than just spoken about. So here we have a case in which years go by, now about the DJ somebody and so forth. We have a case in which years go by before murderers are charged or arrested. And that sort of, as we spoke of earlier, that sort of gap between knowledge of a thing and then it's actually coming to fruition in terms of some punishment allows for people to not take it seriously in a sense. And the second thing I want to say about that social contract is that where we peg when criminality is serious enough to take action on, it's another key signal we send to people. So even though politicians and criminals of a violent sort might be connected, we shouldn't forget that many politicians are also involved in criminality in terms of bribery or construction mafia or putting people onto committees and so forth. And that's also criminality. It's just not of the highlight sexy sort as we imagine in movies of guns and murders and so forth, but it's also criminal. But there's a larger range of toleration of that sort of soft criminality, I'll call it, than there is of violent criminality. But it's part of the same spectrum, and we should be concerned with that kind of criminality as well.
Where does the buck stop, though? Because I don't want to preempt your answer here, but I have a feeling that it has to stop at the top somewhere.
Yeah, it certainly does have to stop at the top somewhere, and right at the top. But it also has to be nudged towards stopping by, as we were saying earlier, by credible people high but lower in the chain saying, I will not stand for this anymore. I cannot serve in this administration. I cannot administer in this justice system, etc. So people who are figureheads at various high levels, just before the top, can tell the country that they cannot be trusted to, or that the top cannot be trusted to to run the country, if that is the case. I'm not saying that it is, but we need those senior figures to speak out and to take the consequences, unfortunately. But who wants to be the martyr? Who wants to lose their jobs and so forth? So we would love that as citizens. We would love our nation to be saved by people who martyr themselves. But you also need to think about the realities of the people who would be doing the martyring, right? Yeah. They also have their own issues to deal with.
Indeed. How does law enforcement or the judiciary or anything like that sort of fight back, if I can call it that? And I say that because while we speak about those that need to be martyrs, perhaps, and saying they don't want to be part of an administration that is, okay with looting or looting, should I say, then bribery, etc., and criminal activities. At the same time, quitting opens a space for somebody of that nature to come back and come into that open space as well. So how exactly do we ensure that there's the right kind of quitting and still the ability to hold people to account?
Yeah, that is a key problem. As you say, the vacuum might well be filled with worse people. And even though you're not succeeding as well as you should in holding the line, you might be the last thing left that does hold the line. Look, the problem here is that we as the public often tend to believe that we know far more than we do from the outside. If you are in the police services or in the judiciary or in the presidency or whatever, you would know far better than any of us what sorts of levers are available for pulling, who can be influenced, and what sort of change that you can make. So it's very hard to diagnose from the outside. But as a citizen, you should notice how strange it is that a few weeks ago, we have the minister in charge of intelligence talking about a coup not being credible, a coup not happening. But why do you keep talking about a coup then? And then in this recent case, we have Mkhwanazi also speaking about potential coups and so forth. So there's a strong sense there that something's going on and people are jockeying against each other. But it's those people inside who can know who needs to be rooted out. So the good people on the inside need to guide us here. But I agree with the sentiment you just expressed. We can't have mass reservation of the good people, but perhaps the good people can all speak out in some way and make us aware of what's going on.
It is when good people say nothing that all that evil, of course, thrives then as well. Jacques Rousseau, fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for helping us apply our minds to this one. Hopefully we can chat again as well.